My boyfriend asked for an open relationship before marrying me, just to see if I was truly worth it. Can you imagine sitting across from the man you've loved for 5 years, your heart practically bursting with desperate hope, convinced he's about to ask you to spend forever together, only for him to demand an open relationship instead? My entire world just stopped. In that single, shattering moment, I realized I was staring into the face of the ultimate betrayal, not just from him, but from myself. I really should have known something was wrong the second he ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without even a glance in my direction. But I was too busy being nervous, buzzing with anticipation, thinking tonight was the night. 5 years. 5 incredible, exhausting, bewildering years. And here we were, at this ridiculously fancy restaurant, all candlelight and hushed whispers, the kind where the menu mysteriously doesn't list prices and the waiters glide in actual tuxedos. My best friend had texted me 3 times that day. Is tonight the night? I'd bought a new dress, spent 2 hours getting ready, even practiced my surprised but delighted face in the mirror that morning. God, the sheer, humiliating stupidity of it all, looking back. I'd made the reservation myself 3 weeks ago, after he dropped enough heavy-handed hints about this special place for our 5-year anniversary. And special, for him, always meant expensive. But I didn't mind paying. I never did. And that, right there, was the insidious root of the problem, though I was still completely blind to it. The waiter cleared our appetizer plates, and that's when he reached across the table and took my hand. My heart actually skipped a beat. This was it. 5 years of supporting him through his endless journey to find himself professionally. 5 years of constantly telling him he was brilliant, talented, just needed the right opportunity. 5 years of footing the bill for almost everything while he slowly, agonizingly, figured out his career path. But none of that mattered, right? Because he loved me. He was finally ready to commit. I remembered the ring I'd seen him looking at online last month. I'd pretended not to notice when he quickly closed the browser tab. I'd been so happy, so hopeful, so utterly, utterly stupid. So, I've been thinking, he started, his thumb tracing circles on my hand. My face was already forming that practiced, joyous smile, thinking about us, about our future. I squeezed his hand, probably too hard. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure the entire restaurant could hear it. I felt like every single person was watching us. I even wondered if people would clap when he proposed. Some people do that. I want to marry you, he said. And for maybe 2 glorious seconds, my brain went completely blank with pure, unadulterated happiness. Then he continued. But I need us to have an open relationship first. What? The words didn't make sense. It was like he'd suddenly started speaking a different language. I heard them. I understood each individual word. But strung together, they formed something my brain simply would not process. I just think, he went on, apparently completely oblivious. He didn't notice that I'd stopped breathing, that my hand had gone limp in his, that my entire world had just tilted sideways and was rapidly free-falling. Before I can fully commit to spending my life with just one person, I need to explore. I need to experience other women. Figure out what's out there. Then I'll know for sure that you're the one. I should have screamed. I should have asked him. Why now? Why, if you needed to be so sure, had you not figured that out before now? Before 5 years? Before this dinner that I'd planned and paid for? Before making me hope, making me dream, making me feel like this was actually happening? But the waiter appeared with our entrees. I watched him set down my salmon like I was observing from outside my own body. The couple next to us had definitely stopped pretending not to listen. I've already thought this through, he continued, cutting into a steak that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. We can set boundaries. Be respectful about it. But I really think this is what I need to be absolutely certain before we take that next step. Here's what I should have done. Thrown that expensive wine in his arrogant face, walked out, blocked his number, and never looked back. Here's what I actually did. I took a sip of water, set down my glass very, very carefully, and said, okay. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. Okay, yes. An open relationship. That sounds totally reasonable. I watched him try to process this. He'd clearly expected tears. Maybe a scene. Definitely some begging. His entire face went through this fascinating journey of confusion, then relief, then something that might have been disappointment that I wasn't more upset. You sure? He asked, almost suspicious now. You're really okay with this? Absolutely. I lied, smiling so wide my face ached. If that's what you need, then that's what we'll do. What he didn't know, what he'd never bothered to notice in 5 entire years, was that I'd been keeping track of everything. Every dinner I'd paid for while he was between jobs. Every shopping trip where I'd casually handed over my card for his new wardrobe. Every vacation I'd funded while he was finding himself. I'd been doing it for so long that, about 6 months earlier, I'd actually started photographing receipts. Something my best friend had suggested when I confessed how much I was spending. She'd been warning me for months that something felt off about our dynamic, that I should keep records just in case. And here's the really messed up part. I'd spent 5 years building up his ego, telling him how attractive he was, how charming. I'd done it because he was so insecure when we first met, and I genuinely thought I was being a good partner by making him feel confident. Turns out, I'd created a monster who genuinely believed his own hype. The rest of dinner was surreal. He actually seemed happy, talking about how mature and evolved our relationship was, how this proved we were different from other couples, how he was lucky to have someone as understanding as me. I nodded and smiled and took mental notes, finishing my salmon that I could barely taste. When we got home that night, I went straight to my laptop while he was in the shower. I created a new folder on my cloud drive, labeled it Documentation. And I started uploading photos of every receipt I'd saved, bank statements showing every single charge to restaurants, clothing stores, that trip to the coast where I'd paid for everything. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. Some part of me, deep down, knew I was going to need this later. The next morning, I woke up to find him already on his phone, gleefully downloading multiple dating apps. He actually showed me his profile, asking if I thought his photos were good enough. "You look great," I told him, which was technically true, but also completely irrelevant to what was about to happen to him. "I think I'll probably have matches within an hour," he said confidently, lying back on the bed that I'd paid for, in the apartment that was in my name. "I mean, I've gotten pretty fit lately, right?" "Absolutely," I agreed, not mentioning that I'd also been paying for his gym membership for 3 years. Within 2 days, his confidence had somehow multiplied exponentially. He'd bought an entire new wardrobe, all charged to credit cards that I'd later discover were completely maxed out. Designer shirts, expensive cologne, shoes that cost more than my car payment. He'd show me his phone screen constantly, pointing out matches and messages. "This one's a lawyer," he'd say, scrolling through photos like he was shopping for groceries. "This one says she loves guys who are ambitious. Oh, and look at this one. She's definitely into me." The first few days, he was unstoppable. He'd come into the living room every hour with updates. "Just matched with someone who looks like a model. I think she's really into me based on her first message." I'd look at the message, which just said, "Hey," and nod supportively. What else could I do? Meanwhile, I'd started going to the pottery studio down the street. Something I'd wanted to do for years but never had time for because I was always working extra hours to pay for everything. The classes were twice a week in the evenings, perfect timing for when he was presumably out on dates. The instructor was this patient woman in her 50s who had this calming philosophy about ceramics reflecting life. "You can't control everything," she'd say while we worked the clay. "Sometimes you just have to let it be what it wants to be." I found that oddly comforting. Except he kept coming home early. Every single time. The first date, he left at 7 p.m. with this swagger I'd never seen before, wearing a new $180 shirt. He was back by 8:30 p.m., slamming the apartment door. "She was boring," he said, which I translated to mean she probably didn't laugh at his jokes or fawn over him the way I always had. The second date, he came home even earlier, looking genuinely shaken. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, finished half of it, said she had an emergency, and left, he muttered. I didn't point out the searing irony of him being upset about someone else ordering expensive food. The third date was a disaster he couldn't stop talking about. "She spent 20 minutes on her phone," he complained. Then she asked if I could cover her parking because she forgot her wallet. Who does that? Someone who saw through you in the first 5 minutes, I thought, but didn't say. By the third week, I'd created 6 pieces at the pottery studio and had lost 5 pounds because I'd started going to the gym during lunch breaks. Turns out, when you're not spending all your free time boosting someone else's ego, you have a lot of extra energy for yourself. And time. So much time that I had somehow forgotten I even had. The gym thing was an accident, really. My co-worker had invited me to try her trainer's class, and I'd figured why not. That's where I met the instructor, this incredibly calm guy who treated everyone with genuine respect. He learned everyone's names by the second class. He never made anyone feel bad for being a beginner. After class one day, I was struggling with my water bottle cap. Stupid thing was stuck, and he just casually helped me open it without making it a thing. "You're getting stronger," he'd said. And it took me a second to realize he meant from the workouts, not the water bottle incident. We'd ended up talking about books. I'd mentioned reading this novel about a woman who hiked the entire Pacific Crest Trail, and his face had lit up. Turned out he'd done part of that trail 3 years ago. Then we talked about travel, about how sometimes you need to physically move through space to process things mentally, about life in general. Nothing romantic, just actual conversations where someone asked me questions and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. Questions like, what made you want to try ceramics? Instead of, what's for dinner? Or, can you check if my card went through? It was such a small thing. Being asked real questions and having someone remember your answers. But after 5 years of being someone's emotional support system and ATM machine, it felt revolutionary. Meanwhile, my boyfriend was becoming increasingly frantic. He'd check his phone every 30 seconds. He'd narrate his entire dating app experience, like I was his therapist. Why aren't they responding? He'd ask. I mean, I'm being really interesting in my messages. I'd glance at his screen and see messages like, hey, beautiful. You up? Sent at 2 p.m. Real compelling stuff. One evening, I came home from pottery class to find him lying on the couch in the dark, just staring at the ceiling. How was your class? He asked, and there was something sharp in his voice. Great, actually. I'm working on this vase that's really coming together. That's nice, he sat up. Who else is in the class? Just a group of people. We're all beginners. Any guys? I looked at him. This person I'd supported for 5 years who'd proposed marriage contingent on sleeping with other women first, and I felt something shift in my chest. A cold, hard realization. Yeah, there are guys in the class. Why? Just curious, but his jaw was tight. You've been going there a lot. Twice a week, like I told you. And you're always coming home so happy. I sat down in the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted. Would you prefer I come home miserable? No, he ran his hands through his hair. Are you seeing someone? The sheer, unmitigated audacity of this question, coming from someone who'd literally demanded an open relationship and had been on about a dozen dates in the past month, was so stunning that I actually laughed. Are you serious right now? It's different, he said, which was apparently his answer. I told you what I was doing. You're being secretive. I'm taking pottery classes and going to the gym. There's nothing secretive about it. But is there someone at the gym? There's the instructor and about 20 other people in the class. The instructor is a guy. Yes, I said, my voice dangerously calm. The instructor is a man. We've talked a few times after class. About books. That's it. His face did this thing where I could literally see him trying to figure out if he could be mad about this without being a complete hypocrite. He settled on sullen silence, which was somehow worse. The next morning, I had coffee with the instructor after class. His name didn't really matter then, but what mattered was that he paid for both our coffees without making it weird. Asked about my job, remembered details I'd mentioned the previous week, and didn't spend 45 minutes talking about himself. When I mentioned it casually to my boyfriend that evening, more to prove that I had nothing to hide, he actually threw his phone at the wall. So, you're seeing him. I had coffee with someone. You've been on 30-something dates in the last month. That's different. I told you I was going to do that. And I told you I was having coffee. What exactly is the problem here? But of course, he couldn't articulate it without revealing himself as the world's biggest hypocrite. So, he just stormed off to the bedroom and slammed the door. I stood there in the living room, looking at his phone on the floor with a cracked screen. I started calculating in my head how much I'd spent on phone repairs for him over the years. For times, if I remembered correctly, probably close to $800 total. I picked up the phone to see if it still worked, and that's when I saw the messages. His screen was still unlocked, and there was a thread with someone named the blonde one, because apparently he didn't even bother learning their actual names. Just categorized them like items in an inventory. The message was from her. Listen, I'm just going to be honest with you. You spent the entire date talking about your ex. Your card got declined at the restaurant. You showed up 20 minutes late, and then you tried to get me to drive you home, because you took a rideshare here and didn't have money for the return trip. I'm not interested. Please don't contact me again. My first thought, his card got declined? He told me that date went well. He'd said she was nice, but not his type. He'd never mentioned any of this. I should have put the phone down. I really should have. But I kept scrolling. There were so many similar messages. Different women, same patterns. It was like reading the same story over and over with slightly different character names. You said you were a project manager, but you spent the whole time complaining about not having a job and how your girlfriend doesn't understand you. Why did you think it was okay to ask me to pay for your drinks after you ordered the most expensive cocktails on the menu? I'm not your therapist, dude. I came here for a date, not to hear about your relationship problems for 2 hours. You arrived late, left early, and spent the entire time checking your phone. What was even the point? Then I found the thread that made my blood run absolutely cold. A woman he'd gone on 3 dates with. She'd sent him a long message explaining why she was ending things. But it was one specific paragraph that hit me like a physical blow. I want to be clear about something. When we tried to be intimate, you kept having issues and then blamed it on stress from your controlling girlfriend. But the thing is, you spent 3 dates telling me how amazing and supportive she is. How she pays for everything. How she always builds you up. So, which is it? Is she controlling, or is she supporting you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you have a good thing, and you're sabotaging it while blaming her for your own problems. I hope you figure that out before you lose her. I read it 3 times. This stranger, this complete stranger, had seen in 3 dates what I'd been blind to for 5 years. Each message was like a tiny, brutal mirror, reflecting back the entitled, self-absorbed person I'd enabled him to become. This person who thought the world owed him something. And I'd helped create that. I'd spent 5 years telling him he was wonderful just the way he was, that he didn't need to change, that someone would see his potential eventually. I'd paid for everything, so he never had to face the consequences of not being able to afford his lifestyle. I'd propped up his ego so thoroughly that he genuinely believed he deserved better than me. But these women, strangers who owed him nothing, had seen through him immediately. I put the phone down very carefully on the coffee table, like it might explode if I moved too quickly. Then I sat there for what might have been 5 minutes or an hour. I honestly couldn't tell. My brain was doing this frantic thing where it kept trying to rewrite the past 5 years with this horrifying new information. Every moment I'd thought was loving support was actually enabling. Every time I'd paid for something to help him out was actually preventing him from growing up. Every compliment I'd given him to boost his confidence had just inflated an ego that was already dangerously overblown. I went straight to my best friend's apartment and showed her everything. Not just the messages, but the receipts, the bank statements, everything I'd been quietly documenting. She made us both tea, even though neither of us was really a tea person. It was just something to do with our hands while we went through it all on her laptop. Okay, she said, opening a new spreadsheet. Let's actually calculate this properly. You've been saying it's a lot, but let's see the real number. We started with rent. 18 months, where I'd covered his half completely. Another year where I'd paid about 75% because he was getting back on his feet. $13,400, she said quietly. Just in rent. Then we added the dinners, clothes, vacations, his car insurance when he said his policy lapsed, phone bills, the security deposit, the furniture. $32,150, she said finally. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. You've spent $32,000 on him in 5 years. That can't be right. My voice was a choked whisper. That's a car. That's a down payment on a house. We literally just calculated it twice. She turned the laptop screen toward me. I stared at the spreadsheet. The numbers blurred together. I could have paid off my student loans with that money. You could have done a lot of things with that money. You created a monster, my best friend said, not unkindly. She reached across and squeezed my hand. You spent 5 years telling him he was amazing, paying for everything, making him feel like he was hot stuff, and now he actually believes it. I did do that, didn't I? You did. But you did it because you loved him and you thought you were helping. The question is, what are you going to do now? What do I do? She looked at me for a long moment. You know what you do. I did know. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Admitting it meant admitting I'd wasted 5 years. Admitting it meant I'd lied to myself as much as I'd lied to him. Admitting it meant starting over at 32 years old with nothing to show for half a decade but a spreadsheet of my own poor decisions and $32,000 I'd never see again. 3 weeks went by in this weird stalemate where we barely spoke. He was still going on dates that all seemed to end in disaster. I was still going to pottery classes and the gym. The tension in the apartment was suffocating. Then one Saturday morning, I woke up to find him sitting at the kitchen table with this serious expression on his face. Not concerned about me, serious. Concerned about him, serious. The kind of face he made when he was about to ask me to cover another bill. We need to talk, he announced, like he was the one who'd been wronged somehow. Like he was the victim in this entire situation. Okay. I poured myself coffee, taking my time. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I'd be nervous, but I just felt tired. So incredibly tired. I've been thinking, he said. And I've decided that I want to close the relationship again. I added cream to my coffee, stirred it, watched the white spiral into the black. You've decided? Yes. I think I've explored enough. I'm ready to commit to you exclusively now. He said it like he was granting me some incredible favor. Like I should be grateful he was choosing me after test driving other options and finding them all wanting. We can go back to how things were before. How generous of you. Don't be like that, he said, and there was an edge to his voice that I'd never heard before. Or maybe I'd heard it many times but had trained myself not to notice. I'm trying to fix this. I'm trying to make things right. We can go back to how things were before. Everything can be normal again. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Normal meant me paying for everything. Normal meant me building up his ego while mine crumbled. Normal meant me being grateful for breadcrumbs while he looked for a better meal. Before you demanded an open relationship at our anniversary dinner? I asked, sitting down across from him. That before you agreed to it, his voice rose. I saw our neighbor's silhouette pass by the window. These walls were too thin for this conversation, but I was past caring. I admitted, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug. The warmth helped somehow. That was my mistake. But here's what's going to happen instead. I'm going to tell you something that you need to hear, and you're going to sit there and listen. He looked almost scared for a second, his eyes widening. But then his face hardened, that defensive wall coming up. If this is about the gym guy, this isn't about anyone else. This is about you and me. And 5 years of lies. I took a breath. This was it. The moment I burned down everything I'd built. I lied to you for 5 years. I lied to you about almost everything that mattered. What are you talking about? I told you that you were amazing in bed. You're not. I faked it so many times I lost count because I thought it would hurt your feelings to tell you the truth. His jaw clenched. I told you that you were brilliant and talented and just needed the right opportunity. But actually, you're mediocre at your job, and that's why you can't keep one. I told you that women must be falling all over themselves for you. But they're not. Are they? I inflated your ego so much that you actually started believing your own hype. His face had gone completely white. You're just saying this to hurt me. I'm saying this because it's true. I created this version of you that doesn't exist. I made you think you were this incredible catch so that you'd feel confident and happy. And what did you do with that confidence? You decided that I wasn't enough for you, that you needed to explore other options before committing to me. You said yes, he whispered. You agreed to the open relationship. Because I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see if you'd actually succeed at finding all these women you thought were waiting for you. And you know what? You didn't. Because the person you think you are doesn't actually exist. I made him up. He stood up so fast his chair fell over. You're a liar. You're manipulative. I have $32,000 in receipts that say I'm the one who's been manipulated. That stopped him cold. What? $32,000. That's what I've spent on you over 5 years. Rent, food, clothes, vacations, your car, everything. I have documentation of all of it. You kept track? His voice was a mixture of horror and disbelief. What kind of person keeps track? The kind of person who knew she might need proof one day. I stood up, too suddenly calm. Here's what's going to happen. I want you out of this apartment. You have 45 days to find a new place and move out. During that time, you're going to pay me back $5,000 in installments. That's a fraction of what you actually owe me. But I'm being generous because I also contributed to this mess. You can't just kick me out. This apartment is in my name. I pay the rent. Check the lease if you don't believe me. He did go check, actually. I heard him in the bedroom rifling through the filing cabinet where I kept important documents. When he came back out, he looked shattered. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You used me, he said, and there were actually tears in his eyes now. You made me think you loved me just so you could control me. No, I did love you. I loved you so much that I tried to build you up instead of letting you face reality. And look where that got us. He left that afternoon to stay with a friend. I changed the locks within 2 hours, not because I thought he'd do anything dangerous, but because I needed to feel safe in my own space. The next morning, I woke up to 17 text messages. Half were apologies, half were accusations. All of them were desperate. I didn't respond to any of them. My best friend came over that evening with wine and takeout. How are you holding up? Honestly, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. Good. Because you know it's going to get worse before it gets better, right? She was right. She was so incredibly right. The formal agreement arrived at his temporary address 3 days later. 45 days to vacate. $5,000 to be paid in installments of $500 per month for 10 months. An itemized list of shared property to be divided. My best friend's cousin was a lawyer and had drawn it up pro bono as a favor. His response came via email, a rambling, 3-page document about emotional manipulation, financial abuse, and how I destroyed his self-esteem on purpose. The lawyer cousin read it and said, This is actually helpful. He's admitting to living in your apartment and benefiting from your financial support. Keep this. Then he showed up at my office, just walked right into the lobby during lunch hour, and started shouting my name. I was at my desk on the 4th floor when my coworker leaned over and said, is someone screaming for you downstairs? By the time I got to the lobby, security had already surrounded him, but he was still yelling. I need to talk to her. She's ruining my life. Someone needs to make her listen to me. My boss was in the lobby, too, along with approximately 30 of my coworkers who'd come down to see what the commotion was about. I'd never wanted to disappear more in my entire life. Sir, you need to leave, the security guard was saying, hands out in that universal calm down gesture. Not until she talks to me. She owes me that much. I stepped forward, keeping my distance but making myself visible. I don't owe you anything. You need to leave. His face, when he saw me, it was like watching someone drowning, desperate, panicked, grasping for anything to hold on to. Please, just 5 minutes. I just want to explain. I just want you to understand what you're doing to me. I understand perfectly. You need to go. You can't do this. You can't just throw away 5 years. You did that when you asked to sleep with other women before marrying me. I turned to the guards. Security, can you please escort him out? They did, but not before he tried to shake them off twice and yelled a few choice words about me that echoed through the marble lobby. My boss called me into her office afterward. Her face a mixture of concern and professional assessment. Are you safe at home? She asked directly. I showed her the agreement I had drawn up, explained the situation as professionally as I could, tried to make it sound less horrifying than it was. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she sat back in her chair. I'm issuing a formal company ban, she said. He's not permitted on these premises under any circumstances. If he shows up again, we'll involve the police immediately. And I'm flagging this with HR. You might want to consider a restraining order. I don't think it'll come to that. She looked at me with these knowing eyes like she'd seen this play out before. Famous last words. Please be careful. That night, I stayed at my best friend's apartment. At 2 o'clock in the morning, her building's intercoms started buzzing. Every single unit, one after another. The doorman called up to say someone was pressing all the buttons and refusing to leave. My friend went downstairs and recorded him on her phone, just standing there in the lobby, looking wild-eyed and frantic. She's destroying my life, he was saying to the security guard. She's trying to ruin me. The guard looked at the camera. Sir, you need to leave, or I'm calling the police. He left, but not before my friend got 3 minutes of video that her lawyer cousin said would be useful if we needed a restraining order. The credit card company started calling. Apparently, he'd listed me as an emergency contact on several accounts, and he'd stopped paying everything. When they couldn't reach him, they called me. I informed each one that I was not responsible for his debts and had documentation proving we had separate finances. They were not happy about it. The mediator meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Professional mediation, neutral location, the lawyer cousin present as my representative. I arrived 20 minutes early because I wanted to be settled and calm when he walked in. He showed up 30 minutes late, wearing one of the designer shirts I bought him, looking flustered and unprepared. He didn't apologize for being late, just sat down heavily and immediately went on the offensive. This is extortion, he said. She's trying to blackmail me into paying money I don't have. The mediator, a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd seen everything twice, glanced at the documentation I provided. You've been living in her apartment for 5 years. Our apartment. It's only in her name. She pays the full rent. According to these bank records, you've contributed approximately 12% of household expenses over that time period. The mediator looked at him over her reading glasses. Is there anything in this documentation that's factually incorrect? He shifted in his seat. The percentages might be off. Were you aware of how much she was paying? I knew she paid for some stuff, but I didn't think she was keeping score. This is documentation of financial transactions. The mediator tapped the papers. You're currently unemployed. Where are you living? With my parents, I said quietly when he didn't answer. The mediator made a note. Miss Iris is requesting $5,000 in reimbursement to be paid over 20 months at $250 per month. Based on the documentation, she could pursue you for the full $32,000 in small claims court. This offer represents approximately 15% of what you actually owe. Do you understand that? He was quiet for a long moment. I can't afford $250 a month. Sir, I've been doing this for 18 years. What I'm seeing here is one person who financially supported another for 5 years, and that person now being upset about being asked to repay a small fraction of that support. You're taking her side. I'm looking at documentation. Bank statements don't take sides.
She turned to me.
Are you willing to accept installments with consequences for missed payments?
Yes.
If he misses 2 consecutive payments, the full remaining balance becomes due immediately. His hands were shaking when he signed. I watched him form each letter of his name and felt absolutely nothing. 5 months later, I stood in my apartment and barely recognized it. I'd repainted every wall, donated or sold everything that reminded me of him, bought new furniture with my own money, stuff that I actually liked instead of compromising on his taste. The pottery pieces from my classes were displayed on floating shelves I'd installed myself. The promotion had come through 2 months earlier, the one I'd been passed over for 3 times while I was with him. 60% salary increase. Leadership role. My own team. My boss had told me she'd always thought I had potential, but that I'd seemed distracted the past few years. You've really come into your own lately, she'd said. The payments from him arrived exactly, on time, every month. $500 like clockwork. I documented each one in a spreadsheet, but felt no emotional reaction to seeing his name on the transactions. It was just data now. Proof that this chapter was closing. Pottery classes had turned into something I genuinely loved. My pieces were still imperfect, wonky in places where the clay hadn't cooperated, but I'd learned to appreciate the flaws. The instructor had commented that my work showed more personality than the technically perfect pieces some students made. The gym had become routine too. I'd lost 15 pounds without even trying, just from the stress being gone, and actually having time to take care of myself. The instructor and I had coffee regularly now, sometimes dinner. Nothing serious, nothing pressured, just 2 people who enjoyed each other's company. He paid for things without making it transactional. He asked about my day and remembered what I told him. When I talked, he listened instead of waiting for his turn to speak. The encounter happened on a random Tuesday at the supermarket, 3 months into my new life. I was comparing prices on pasta sauce, actually comparing prices for the first time in forever because I was on a budget now. A real budget. Not the fake kind where I pretended to care about money while spending thousands on someone else. When I saw him 2 aisles over, reading the label on a can of generic soup with the kind of intense concentration usually reserved for legal documents, he looked different. Thinner. Definitely the kind of thin that comes from stress rather than intentional weight loss. Tired, with circles under his eyes that I could see even from this distance. The designer clothes were gone, replaced with a t-shirt I didn't recognize and jeans that had seen better days. Worn at the knees, frayed at the hem. For a man who used to spend $180 on a single shirt, this was practically a costume. He saw me at the same moment. For a second, we just stared at each other across the dried goods aisle, like 2 characters in a Western showdown. Other shoppers pushed their carts between us, oblivious to the heavy weight of 5 years hanging in the air. Then he put the soup can back on the shelf and started walking toward me, and every muscle in my body tensed. "Hey," he said quietly when he reached me. His voice was different too. Smaller somehow. "Can we talk?" "I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just 5 minutes. I need closure." There was something almost pitiful about him now, standing there clutching a wire basket with 3 items in it. Generic soup. Store-brand bread. A single can of tuna. I remembered when he used to fill carts with imported cheeses and organic everything, never checking prices, because I'd always just pay at the checkout. But I'd learned enough in therapy, which I'd started immediately after he moved out, to know that his need for closure wasn't my responsibility. "I'm good," I said simply. Turning back to my pasta sauce like this was a normal conversation with a normal acquaintance. "I hope you're doing okay, but I don't think we have anything to discuss. Everything fell apart because of you." It came out flat, almost matter-of-fact, like he was stating an obvious truth that I was somehow refusing to acknowledge. And there it was. The real reason he wanted to talk. Not closure. Blame. "I need to go," I said, starting to push my cart past him. "Wait, please." He grabbed my arm, and I yanked it away so fast that my cart rolled into a display of canned tomatoes. "Don't touch me." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." He looked around at the other shoppers who were definitely watching now. "I just want you to understand what you did to me. I understand that you're still not taking responsibility for your own choices. That's all I need to know." I pulled out my phone. "If you don't leave me alone right now, I'm calling the police." He left. I watched him abandon his basket and walk out of the store, shoulders hunched like he was bracing against wind that only he could feel. At home that night, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello." "Hi, this is his mother. I hope you don't mind me calling." I minded very much, actually, but I was too surprised to say so. "He's living with us again," she continued. "He lost his job about a month ago. He's not doing well, and all he talks about is you and how everything went wrong. I think he wants to try to work things out. That's not going to happen. I understand. I do. But maybe if you could just see him one more time? Let him explain.
No.
My voice was firm.
Please.
As a mother, I'm asking you to, with all due respect. I cut her off, my voice steady. Your son is a grown man who made his own choices. I spent 5 years supporting him financially and emotionally. And when that wasn't enough for him, he demanded an open relationship before he'd consider marrying me. I didn't destroy anything. He did. There was a long pause. He told me you agreed to the open relationship. I did agree, because I wanted to see what would happen. And what happened was exactly what I suspected would happen. I see. Another pause. He never told me about the financial part. About how much you'd paid for. I'm sure he didn't. I'm sorry for calling. I just thought maybe I could fix this for him, but I can see now that there's nothing to fix. She sounded tired. For what it's worth, I think he knows he messed up. He's just too proud to admit it. After she hung up, I sat on my couch in my redecorated apartment, with my pottery pieces catching the evening light, and realized I didn't feel guilty at all. Maybe that made me cold. Maybe it made me self-protective. Either way, it felt like progress. 7 months after that anniversary dinner, I was setting up for a small dinner party when the doorbell started ringing. Not just ringing, leaning on it. The sound drilling into my skull, like someone was testing my patience on purpose. I looked at my best friend, who was helping me arrange cheese on a board we'd spent 20 minutes making look Pinterest perfect, and she immediately pulled out her phone. Don't open it until I'm ready to record, she said, her face dead serious. Through the peephole, I could see him. He was holding flowers, wilted carnations that looked like they'd been sitting in a gas station cooler for a week, and swaying slightly on his feet.
Drunk.
Very unmistakably drunk. His shirt was buttoned wrong, I noticed. And he'd cut his hair himself. Badly, with chunks uneven around his ears. I know you're in there, he shouted, loud enough that I heard one of my neighbor's doors open down the hall. We need to talk. You can't just ignore me forever. I'm calling the police. I called through the door, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. You need to leave right now. I just need 5 minutes. Just let me explain everything. I can fix this. I opened my phone and dialed. The 911 operator answered immediately, her voice calm and professional, and I said very clearly, my ex-boyfriend is at my door, intoxicated and refusing to leave. I need an officer here, please. I gave her my address, spelled out my apartment number twice. No one wanted me, he was shouting now, and I could hear him crying. This ugly, gasping sound that might have broken my heart 6 months ago. Every single woman I met, they all said no. Do you know how that feels? Do you know what that's like? This is all your fault. My best friend was filming from the window now, while 2 other friends huddled in the kitchen, wide-eyed and silent. One of them whispered, "Is he going to break down the door?" This was not how I'd envisioned my dinner party going. I'd made lasagna. I'd bought good wine. I'd cleaned for 3 hours. You took everything from me, he wailed. My confidence, my family, my job, everything. All because I made one mistake. One mistake. And you turned everyone against me. Sir, I heard a voice say. I looked out the peephole again to see my neighbor, the older man from apartment 3C, who'd always been kind to me. He was standing in his doorway in slippers and a cardigan. You need to leave this young lady alone. This is between me and her. This is none of your business. The police are on their way. If I were you, I'd leave before they arrive. Public intoxication is a crime, you know. But he didn't leave. Of course, he didn't leave. He just kept ringing the doorbell and pounding on the door and shouting about how I'd manipulated him, used him, destroyed him, how I'd turned his family against him, how his mother wouldn't even talk to him anymore because of what I'd said, how I'd stolen 5 years of his life and given him nothing but lies in return. When the police arrived 6 minutes later, I timed it. He started crying even harder and saying he just wanted to talk to me like adults. The officers separated him from my door, took statements from me and my neighbor, and issued him a formal warning. If he came back, they said I could get a restraining order with no problem. They walked him to his car, parked illegally in a fire lane, naturally, and watched him call a rideshare before letting him leave. After they left, I closed my door, locked it, engaged the chain, and just stood there breathing for a full minute. My friends were silent, waiting to see how I'd react. Would I cry? Would I be angry? Would I feel guilty? I felt relieved. That's what surprised me most. Not anger, not sadness, just pure relief that I wasn't tied to that chaos anymore. I wasn't responsible for his emotions or his choices or his failures. I was just responsible for me. Are you okay? My best friend asked. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. Let's eat. We had our dinner party. We drank wine. We laughed. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't spend any mental energy worrying about someone else's feelings. The ninth payment was 3 weeks late when the email arrived. It was long, rambling, full of justifications and excuses, but the core message was clear. He wanted to meet in person to renegotiate the agreement because he couldn't afford the payments anymore. I showed the email to the lawyer cousin who snorted and took a sip of her coffee. He means he wants you to forgive the debt. Classic manipulation tactic. Don't fall for it. I won't. But maybe meeting him one more time isn't the worst idea. Get it over with. Make it clear this is the end. Draw that line in permanent marker. Just do it somewhere public, with witnesses. So, I agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. Lots of witnesses. I brought my best friend as backup, made her sit at a nearby table where she could intervene if needed, but far enough that he might not notice her immediately. I arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a coffee I probably wouldn't drink just to have something to do with my hands. The barista was playing indie music too loudly, and the whole place smelled like burnt espresso. He walked in looking like a different person. He'd lost at least 20 pounds, not in a healthy way. Gaunt, not fit, hollow-cheeked. The expensive clothes were long gone. He was wearing cheap sneakers and a hoodie I'd never seen before, gray and shapeless. But it was his eyes that really got me. This hollow look, like something vital had been scooped out of him, and nothing had filled the space it left behind. He sat down across from me without ordering anything, without even asking if I wanted anything, and folded his hands on the table. They were shaking slightly. Thanks for meeting me. You said you wanted to renegotiate, right? So, I've been struggling. Really struggling. I lost my job 3 weeks ago. I'm living with my parents in their basement. They charge me rent now. Can you believe that? My own parents. And I just can't afford the $250 a month anymore, on top of everything else. I was hoping we could work something out. Maybe reduce it to 100, or extend the timeline even more. You signed an agreement. I know, but that was before everything fell apart. Before I lost everything. You don't understand what it's been like for me. You're doing fine. You got that promotion. You have your apartment, your life. I have nothing. Nothing. His voice cracked on the last word. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee and waited. I'd learned in therapy that silence was a powerful tool, that I didn't need to fill every gap in conversation with comfort or explanation. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone sit with their own discomfort. Everyone left me, he continued, his voice rising slightly. My friends don't want to hear about it anymore. My parents are disappointed in me. My mom actually said I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Can you believe that? My own mother taking her side. Women won't even match with me on apps now. Do you know how humiliating that is? I imagine it's difficult. Difficult? He let out this bitter laugh. It's destroying me. Every day I wake up and realize that everything I thought I had, everything I thought I was, it was all a lie. And you did that. You made me believe something that wasn't true. It's your fault. And there it was. The real reason for this meeting. You lied to me for 5 years. You built me up just to tear me down. You made me think I was someone I wasn't. And then you showed me the truth in the cruelest way possible. You wanted me to fail. You wanted to humiliate me. I set down my coffee cup carefully. You asked me to marry you contingent on you sleeping with other women first. You thought you deserved better than me. Those were your choices, not mine. Because you made me think I could. You made me believe I was special. You told me I was smart and talented and good-looking, and then you ripped it all away.
I did.
That's true. And that was wrong of me. I should have been honest from the beginning instead of protecting your ego. I leaned forward slightly. But what happened after that? That's all on you. You could have taken my honesty as a wake-up call to work on yourself. Instead, you've spent months blaming me for your own failures. You manipulated me financially. I supported you financially. I paid for things because I thought I was being a good partner. Yes, I should have stopped doing that years ago. But you were perfectly happy to let me pay for everything as long as you benefited from it. You turn my family against me. I've had one conversation with your mother where she called me asking if I'd take you back. I told her no. That's it. He was spiraling now. I could see it. His arguments getting more desperate and less coherent. You stole my potential. I could have been successful if you hadn't made me dependent on you. If you hadn't made me think I was better than I am. You had 5 years of me paying your rent and hyping you up. If you were going to be successful, that would have been the perfect time to prove it. I want you to forgive the debt. I want you to admit that you manipulated me. I want you to take responsibility for what you did to my life.
No.
What? No to all of it.
The debt stands.
You have 48 hours to send the payment, or I'll file in small claims court for the entire amount you owe me. Not just the agreed upon $5,000. You can't be serious. I have never been more serious in my life. I supported you financially and emotionally for 5 years. I built you up when you were down. And when that wasn't enough for you, you asked for permission to cheat on me before committing. I'm done taking responsibility for your choices. His face went through this extraordinary series of expressions: shock, rage, disbelief, and finally something that might have been grief. You're a terrible person, he said quietly. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just done being manipulated by guilt. I hope you're happy with yourself. I actually am. That's what's really bothering you, isn't it? That I'm fine. That I moved on. That I'm not sitting around regretting what I did to poor you. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Several people in the coffee shop turned to look. You ruined everything, he shouted. You manipulated me. You lied to me. You stole years of my life. The barista started moving toward us, and I saw my best friend stand up at her table. But before anyone could intervene, I just sat there calmly and said, You have 48 hours. He called me a word that I won't repeat. Then another and another. The manager was already asking him to leave. A couple near the window was filming on their phone. He looked around at all these witnesses, watching him have a complete meltdown, and seemed to finally understand what was happening. He left. The manager came over to ask if I was okay. I assured him I was fine. My best friend joined me at the table, and we sat there for a few minutes in silence. That was intense, she finally said. Yeah, you good? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Was I good? This man I'd spent 5 years with had just called me horrible names in public and blamed me for every bad thing in his life. Shouldn't I feel guilty? Shouldn't I feel something? I'm good, I said, and realized I meant it completely. The payment arrived 24 hours later. 1 year after that anniversary dinner, I stood in front of the company's board of directors and presented the project I'd been leading for 8 months. The digital transformation initiative that would streamline 3 departments, save approximately $200,000 annually, and position us for expansion into new markets. I'd worked on this presentation for weeks, rehearsing in my apartment until I could recite it in my sleep, tweaking slides until they were perfect. My hands weren't shaking. That's what I noticed first. A year ago, I would have been trembling, second-guessing every word, wondering if I was good enough. But now, standing in front of 15 executives in expensive suits, I felt solid, grounded, sure of myself in a way I'd never been before. When I finished, there was this beat of silence that felt like an eternity. And then the CEO started clapping. Then everyone else joined in. Real applause, not the polite golf clap kind. After the meeting, she pulled me aside in the hallway, her heels clicking on the marble floor, and said the words I'd been waiting years to hear. We're creating a management position for you, Director of Digital Innovation. You've more than earned it. I called my best friend from my car in the parking garage and ugly cried for 10 minutes straight. Happy tears. Relieved tears. I made it tears. That weekend was the Pottery Studios Community Showcase. Small event, local artists and students. Nothing fancy, but they'd accepted 3 of my pieces for display, and that felt huge. I'd been working on them for months, experimenting with different glazes and techniques, learning to embrace the imperfections that came with being a beginner. One piece had this crack running through it that happened during firing, and instead of throwing it away, I'd filled it with gold leaf, turning the flaw into a feature. My friends came to the opening, co-workers came, the gym instructor came, bringing nice champagne and introducing me to the studio owner as the artist, not as his girlfriend or his date, just as someone whose work he respected. And then, surprisingly, his mother walked in. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She was wearing a nice dress, carrying flowers, looking nervous. She approached me carefully, like I might run away. I hope it's okay that I came, she said. My sister saw the event listed online and told me about it. Your work is beautiful. She was looking at one of my vases, a lopsided thing with imperfect glazing that I'd almost not submitted. Really beautiful. Thank you. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly, for calling you that time, for putting that pressure on you, and for not realizing sooner what was really happening with my son. You don't need to apologize. I do, though. I raised him to think the world owed him something. I made excuses for him when he messed up. I blamed other people instead of making him face consequences. She touched the edge of my vase gently. He needs to fix himself. I see that now. And he can't do that if people keep rescuing him. We stood there for a moment. 2 women who'd both spent too much time trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. How is he doing? I asked, surprising myself. He's in therapy, actually. Going to sessions, and trying to work on himself. He got a job, not a great one, but he shows up every day. He's paying me rent. She smiled, a sad but genuine smile. Small steps. She looked at me. He asked me to tell you he's sorry if I saw you. But he didn't ask me to tell you anything else. No messages, no requests. Just sorry. Tell him I hope he figures things out. I will. She smiled sadly, but genuinely. You deserved better than what he gave you. I'm glad you know that now. After she left, the instructor brought me a glass of the champagne he'd brought. Everything okay?
Yeah.
Actually, really okay. The exhibition continued. People looked at my work, asked questions, even bought one of my pieces. When I got home that night, I was riding this wave of accomplishment and peace that I'd never quite felt before. I started unpacking some boxes I'd been meaning to sort through for months. Stuff that had been shoved in the back of the closet during all the chaos of the breakup. Old tax documents, college textbooks I'd never look at again. Random cables for electronics I no longer owned. In one box, buried under a stack of old magazines, I found a photo album I'd forgotten about. Leather-bound, expensive, something I'd bought 3 years ago, thinking I'd fill it with memories of us. I'd only managed to add photos from the first 2 years before I apparently gave up on the project. There we were from years ago, young and hopeful and so convinced we were going to make it work. There was one from our first apartment, both of us holding champagne glasses and grinning at the camera. Another from a beach trip where we'd buried each other in sand. One from a concert where we were both sweaty and exhausted and happy. I looked at the girl in those photos, the one who thought love meant sacrificing everything. Who thought supporting someone meant lying to them about reality. Who thought making herself smaller would somehow make him bigger. She was smiling in every photo, but I could see it now. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes. The way she was always leaning toward him while he looked at the camera. The way she held herself like she was trying not to take up too much space. For a long time, I'd felt guilty about that girl. Guilty that I'd wasted her time. That I'd let her stay in a bad situation for so long. That I'd convinced her to dim her own light so someone else could feel like they were shining. I'd spent hours in therapy talking about her, crying for her, wishing I could go back and shake her and tell her to run. But looking at those photos now, all I felt was compassion. She'd done the best she could with what she knew at the time. She'd loved someone imperfectly because nobody had ever taught her what healthy love looked like. She'd made mistakes, yes, but she'd also eventually found the courage to stop making them. And when she finally learned better, she'd done better. I closed the album and put it back in the box. Not to hide it or forget about it, but just because I didn't need to look at it anymore. The story it told wasn't my story anymore. I was writing something new now. Something where I was the main character instead of the supporting role in someone else's narrative. My phone buzzed on the counter. The group chat with my friends making plans for dinner next week. The gym instructor sending a funny article about pottery fails he thought I'd appreciate. My boss following up on something from the presentation with 3 fire emojis and you killed it. All these people who saw me for who I actually was, not who I was pretending to be. I pulled out my laptop and started looking at real estate listings. The apartment had been fine for recovering and rebuilding, but I was ready for something that was entirely mine, something I chose without compromise, that reflected who I was now, not who I'd been. I wanted a place with good light for my pottery. Maybe a small balcony where I could have morning coffee. A space that felt like me, just me. Nobody else's energy lingering in the corners. The gym instructor and I were taking things slow, really slow. For the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing into anything or trying to prove something. We had dinner sometimes, talked about real things, and there was no pressure to define what we were. It felt healthy, natural, like building something on an actual foundation instead of quicksand. A year ago, I'd sat across from someone who told me I wasn't enough for him unless he could sample other options first. I'd said yes because I wanted to see what would happen because some part of me already knew what would happen. And what happened was that I learned exactly how much I was worth. Turns out it was a lot more than $32,000 and 5 years of my life. Turns out I'd always been enough. I just needed to believe it myself. The apartment search could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I just sat there on my balcony, watched the city, and felt genuinely happy. Not the fake kind I'd performed for 5 years. Just real, simple contentment. And that in itself was everything. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between staying comfortable in a lie or embracing a painful truth? Or maybe you had an awakening moment where you finally realized your own worth. Share your story or your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really love to hear from you.